Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is a psychologist, an author, and a caregiver. Her name is Sarah Vosburgh. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I was pretty... What's the word I would use? Every now and again I get like an episode that comes through or a guest or something where it's like it tackles quite a tough subject or a deep subject, something like that. So I kind of have to approach it a little bit differently. But I always look at it as like a big honor because it kind of, I feel like those shows tend to give you more of what's the word I'm looking for? I'm running out of words. For someone who talks all the time. It gives you an opportunity to kind of deep dive into something, think about things, reflect on life, which I feel is always kind of the most important thing. I think certainly with this show over the years has been the thing I've always been proudest of is just getting people to talk about their lives and experiences and everything in between. So yeah, just starting off by saying thanks for being on the show. Really, really appreciate it. Let's just jump into some good stuff. So your book, Who Will Name the Bees? I love that title. I know my partner loves bees, so but I know it's more of a metaphor. But anyway, it explores themes of memory, loss, faith, and the quiet moments that shape a life. So if I'm right in understanding this, because when I was doing my research, I was trying to kind of build a picture of what your writing is. So it's a memoir that discusses your journey going into caregiving as you made the commitment to provide care for your mother. So I guess my first question is, why did you decide to write and publish this memoir? What was the motivation to do so?
I never intended to be an author, and I never intended to write about this. And it wasn't until after my mother died that just stories about her kept coming out. And they were stories, some of them were stories that I had told many, many times to my family about, when I was little, my mom did this, or, grandma did that, or whatever. But then they started to they woke me up at night, and I kept saying in the middle of the night that I needed a pencil and paper, and my husband got me a glass top for my night table and handed me a Sharpie and said, when you wake up in the night, write stuff down and then you'll have it. And I did, and it sort of came out in bits and pieces, but I didn't do anything with it. And then I got involved as I was looking at retirement. I was looking at some of the things I wanted to do in retirement, and I got involved with San Diego Writers Inc. And I took a class there about memoir just because I was curious and interested, and a lot of the stuff that I was writing was memoir-esque. And we got assignments every week, and 5 pages at a time, I wrote bits and pieces off that stuff that was written in Sharpie on the night table. And all of a sudden I realized I had a huge volume of information and did some real thinking about what I wanted to do with it.
Before you went to publish it, was there anything throughout the course of writing it that surprised you when you were looking back through these notes? Because obviously, whenever you hear about people writing a book, you always hear them talking about the process, how long it can take. I mean, I saw a post the other day where someone was saying it took her up to like 3 years to write a book, because it's this big process and it depends what your goal is ultimately. And as you said, like, it wasn't the initial plan, but then it becomes clearer, like, oh, okay, this is going to be this is going to be a memoir. So was there anything that surprised you in that journey, or maybe even just like when you were writing these stories down that you kind of felt was a surprise?
It surprised me that it ended up being a memoir and that I had enough information, and it all was so thematic, and I thought a lot about memory and legacy and passing that stuff on, but I also thought a lot about how alone I was when this was happening, how alone I felt, and I had the support, total support, of my husband and my bestie, But I'm an only child, and it was just, I would hear friends talk about doing the same with their families, needing to do something with grandma or needing to do something with mom, and the fights they would have with siblings about that. Who was going to take care of her, and who rushed in as the hero who lived, 5 states away, and those kinds of things. And, they would say to me, oh, you're so lucky you get to make all these decisions yourself. Yes, I guess I was lucky that I got to make them all myself, but it was very, very lonely. So I wanted another aspect of writing it down and publishing it was that I wanted people to not feel so alone, whether they were part of a larger sibling group or an only like me or the only one left. I just wanted them to know that I know my experiences aren't unique. Maybe my stories about my mother are unique, but I know that the experience itself isn't unique. I just wanted people to know that they weren't alone. And yeah, and that became a driving force.
Walk me through the process of like writing the memoirs when it became a full memoir. Like, how did you structure that exactly?
I didn't. So I got the assignments from the classes I was taking, and we were only to bring 5 pages at a time to class. And I'm a do things at the last minute kind of person, so classes were on Saturday, and I would get up on Saturday. I'd think about it all week, but I'd get up on Saturday morning and I would write it, and then I would go to class. And I only had to write 5 pages, and I knew I could get 5 pages down, and then we would read them to each other and give feedback and so on and so forth. And then when I realized that I had volume and that it kind of had some order to it, it kind of had a vessel, if you will, of the time that my mother was, I call it incarcerated, because she would have, had she been in her right mind. I realized I was sitting on my living room floor, and my husband can attest to this, was sitting on my living room floor putting out papers essays along the floor of things that had happened, and they were in a chronological order. And it was then that I had the idea to do the flashbacks. So the first part of each chapter is what is happening with my mother at the time in memory care. And then the second half of it is something that happened at that time of year in my younger or not so younger life. And in between is a poem. Poetry grabs me the same way other things do, and so a lot of those got written with Sharpie on the glass too. And I picked the ones that went with the months that they were in, and I felt like they were that they gave more depth to the understanding of my relationship with my mother without my having to write lengthy prose to explain it. So I feel like the book is in black and white, and I feel like the poetry is a color snapshot.
When you started reading these stories to people, that must have been pretty daunting. Like, how did it feel sharing those stories with, strangers? I'm sure you read it to like your husband, people around you and stuff, but like, that's different because it's your close knit. You know what I mean? But it's when it's strangers, that's like, it's a part of you. It's a personal thing, a very personal thing, a deeply emotional thing. What was that like for you?
You're absolutely right. Sharing it with close friends and family, it was always like, oh, this is so good. You did such a good job. This really captures her. And I was like, no. This is the first foray that I've taken into writing, and I need some criticism. What's wrong with it? And the only person who gave me criticism really was my husband, and he didn't give a lot. He more added details that I might have forgotten. from things that he had been around for also. So I was desperate, really. I was really, really looking for criticism, and I was happy to get it when I got it. The thing that surprised me is when I wrote it, I just wrote it. It just came out and I did it. Sometimes it was really angry and required editing, and that was fine. But when I read it out loud in class, more often than not, there were tears. And I did not realize how much of a catharsis and a healing and a mourning that it was, because it had all been put off while I was making decisions about how to keep my mother safe.
Yeah, you often hear people talk about this, like when they're going, because obviously every human being has a completely different emotional makeup. You know, some of us, it completely paralyzes us. We can't do anything. For others, it's, you know, I think I'm a bit like yourself, like doer, like focus on the thing. But then the problem with that is the emotions get put to a side, and ideally they get addressed later or in private or whatever, or sometimes they just don't, and then it comes out later, and it's a dangerous one. I wondered on that theme, when you were going through and rereading everything and looking through it, was that in any way traumatic for you, or was that like how did you manage your emotions, that kind of essentially reliving it, you know what I mean? Because you're thinking about these things as you're reading them, as you're sharing them, etc. Like, walk me through that a little bit.
You kind of hit the nail on the head with the doer thing. I realized something needed to be done. I did a lot of research. I visited a lot of memory care units that were near me so that she could be near me, and so on. But it was all very mechanical. I did it because I knew I needed to do it, but it was all in my head and in my heart, in the sense that I wanted to keep her safe and have her be content, which was a very romanticized view, I might add. There was no contentness for her in this process. It was not content at all. And there wasn't, looking back on it, there's not much I could have changed about that. But I really didn't feel it until afterwards. And I think that's probably part of the reason that the writing came before I took the classes and so on, is that I was doing the work that I couldn't do because it would have derailed me. I would have been dysfunctional if I realized what was happening. And my mother was second generation, potentially third generation Alzheimer's. From the stories that I hear about my great-grandfather, it's likely that he also had it. My grandmother had it. I was old enough when she really started to deteriorate that I was aware of what was going on. I was aware of how my mother handled it. And so I had a bit of a roadmap relative to my mother's opinions about how that should be handled and how long independence should be fostered and so on. So I just followed the manual and didn't think emotionally.
So she actually gave you some advice then, or she, at least based on her experiences, gave you an idea of what might be to come?
Yeah, not so much what might be to come, but well, yes, I guess. She was absolutely committed to helping my grandmother, who was a BSN, a bachelor's in nursing, one of the first ever from her school that actually got a BS in the process. She was really proud of that. She was really, really proud of her education. She was born in the early 1900s. Actually, she was born in the late 1800s. And, came to her own in the early 1900s and went to nursing school then. So, and education was a fiercely important thing in my family. So she was fiercely proud of that. My mother was fiercely proud of her. And she wanted to help. She thought that she could help my grandmother intellectualize herself through it. Like, if you're really smart, you can do this, you can get past this because you're so smart. And so she treated my grandmother like she was able to be independent, and she wasn't. And my dad and I would argue with her and say, this has to stop. She didn't live far from our house. My mother would go over twice a day, have her take her meds, bring her meals, stuff like that. But she would leave meals on the table and forget to eat them. She'd leave the water running in the bathroom sink. She'd forget that there was a toilet if she needed to use it. She'd not remember to put on clothes or take off clothes or change clothes, so on and so forth. And that all shouldn't have been happening. I mean, it was an assault on her dignity, but my mother was trying. So I felt like I needed to do the same for her. Now, it was a little bit different context. For my grandmother, my grandfather was dead when this was happening. So it was just my mom and my dad and me who were caring for her. My dad died when I was younger, and my mom remarried, and it had been, I guess, my assumption, not necessarily correct, that he would be caring for her. He was her husband. And later on, I found out that they had had discussions about that, and she was very emphatic with him that she did not want to become a burden to me, and that part of his responsibility was to care for her. But she also never expected to be in the condition that she was, because she expected to know that it was happening, and there was a book that came out, I don't remember when, it was long before this happened with her, but it was called The Final Exit, and it was about ending your own life if you were ill or deteriorating or whatever. And she made it clear to me that she was going to do that if that were the case, which was something that we argued about over and over and over again. And I would say to her, Mom, it would be a privilege for me to care for you at the end of your life, no matter what your condition is, and she would have none of it. So it was all about the independence and being able to use her intellect and so on and so forth. With the way she behaved with my grandmother, the arguments that we had about it, and how she talked about what might happen with her if that were the case. When all was said and done, she didn't remember, thank the Lord, because I think that would have been almost harder to deal with. So, yeah. So that was her roadmap. Her roadmap was her behavior, her example, family history, all of that kind of guided where I was going with what I was doing with her, and not having any help from him. And I think, I try to be kind to him in that situation. I think that there was a lot of denial. He wanted a partner, and he wanted her to be able to do the things that he wanted to do with her, and he didn't want to have to face any of this, and I don't think he had the skills to do it. So I was inserting myself into something that I should never have inserted myself into. It should have been a back and forth conversation about, this is what's going to happen, and it wasn't. It was, or what should happen, and it ended up being this is what's going to happen because I can't get you to discuss this with me.
What do you think when it comes to deciding to become a caregiver, what sort of things should a person be considering before making that kind of commitment?
Well, I did a lot of little test trials. We had her come to the house to stay a weekend, to stay a week, to do stuff with the kids, that kind of thing. I was the classic sandwich generation. I had a mom who was failing, and kids I was raising who, weren't driving age, needed to get them everywhere, all of that sort of thing. So how it fits into your life and what you're able to do, I was not able to quit my job in order to care for her.
Wow.
So those financial concerns need to be there, and I hate that that needs to be a part of it. And also your ability to care. When my mother was in my home, she was completely confused because it wasn't her space. She didn't know, she couldn't remember where anything was. She'd been to my home many, many, many times, obviously, but could not remember where the bathroom was or the kitchen or, you know, where to sit down in a comfy chair. She couldn't do that. So then and then there were, Mom, it's time to get dressed, let's pick out something to wear sort of thing. And she couldn't do it, and there ended up being arguments over those things. And would I handle it differently now? Yes. Would it have made a whole lot of difference? I don't think so, because of the place she was in the process of her mind, failing on her. So those are things that need to be considered too, because her dignity became a huge part of this. Was her dignity protected in this process? And she had breast cancer for the second time while all of this was going on. It was early, but she had it, and she was adamant that she was much older at the time, and she was adamant that she would be treated like any 30-year-old, and that's not the protocol for someone who was her age. And she argued with the doctor about it, and I think they just didn't want to argue with her anymore. So they did do that. It took a lot out of her, but she couldn't care for herself, and he didn't care for her. So her wounds got infected. They took skin from her back to make way for implants in the front, and the wound in the back got infected because she couldn't reach it, and he wouldn't care for it. And that's a dignity and safety issue for me. And I was adamant that dignity and safety needed to be at the top of the list. And I think I wanted to make for all of that. I wanted to care for her, but I had to recognize my limitations and the limitations of our relationship at that point. And I think those are things to consider. Can you do that? Does it become a constant argument? Is she going to try and escape the house? I can't lock her into my house. She took a walk down a secondary road, a secondary highway, trying to get to my dad from her own home, because there was a strange man in her house, because she didn't recognize her second husband. So that dignity and the safety, I think, are things that really need to be considered in the process. And it's going to be different for every family and every circumstance.
I think a lot of the time in these instances, people are all for, like doing it. Like, of course I want to be there. I want to take care of my loved ones. I don't want to send them to a home. And it's like, I think you have to always consider the practical side of things. I mean, you mentioned having a job. This is a big one. Not everyone can afford to, like, say, quit their job and do it full time. So that's number one. Number two, when I say the practicality, I mean, like, okay, maybe getting a stair lift, getting a special type of bathroom, toilet facilities and stuff. All these different considerations. I've seen some of it firsthand. I'm not by any means an expert, but like I've seen it. I've seen how it plays out, and what I've kind of concluded is you have to probably get like some sort of a consultant to help you with it, and then kind of decide, right, these are the elements of care that need to be done. This is kind of what the schedule will look like, etc. Now, earlier you did mention that you'd consulted a bunch of people, like, but how did you, I guess, settle on like, okay, I can do this. This is what I need to do. Like, how did you decide on all of that?
First of all, I would have loved to have had a consultant, and I don't think that ever occurred to us, and I'm not sure that there were that many who were out there at the time. And I I learned very quickly that I was not going to be able to be my mother's full-time caregiver, that I wasn't going to be able to wrestle her into the shower or whatever. And we would have been happy to do visiting nurses and so on. She would not tolerate anyone. So again, dignity, safety. She wouldn't have wanted anyone to help her take a shower because she wouldn't have wanted anyone to see her naked. I never saw my mother naked until the day she died. And, you know, when I talk about I want people not to feel so alone about this whole process. I had a professor back in the day in grad school who said parenting is an amateur sport. And it absolutely is. It's an amateur sport with the first one, and then you think you know what you're supposed to do, and the second one comes out completely differently, and on and on. And I would say that parenting your parent, which is what we end up doing in this situation, is also an amateur sport. And you make the very best decisions that you can with the information that you have at the time that you have it and at the time that it's happening. And do I have regrets? Not truly regrets. It's more, gosh, I wish I had that information back then. And maybe I tried to do too much alone by myself because that's what I did because, yeah, I'm an only child and that's what you do. But, yeah, it's, you don't get a blueprint or a roadmap for it any more than you do when you have the kid. And every dementia patient is different. If you've met one, you've met one. My mom became very angry and combative, and she was only 4'11" and was probably 100 pounds dripping wet. But the adrenaline flows, and that becomes difficult to deal with. And yeah, and I didn't want my children either to have memories of her being so combative and difficult. They had good memories from their time with her and when she wasn't failing, and I didn't want those later memories to be about the combativeness and the resistance and the having to, fight with her to get her to do simple things.
So did you just sort of say, like, for the time being, maybe it's best not to visit her? Was that kind of how you kept them away, at least just during the harder times? Or
she sang with us 3 generations in our church choir, so they saw her at least once a week, but more often twice a week, once for rehearsal and then for church, and then we would sometimes go out afterwards for church. And for whatever reason, she was usually in a decent mood at those times. So they got that in those waning years. Yeah, and I would say that my mother's nosedive was quicker than many. Sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and this is interesting.
Trauma also hastens all of that, and chemotherapy did nothing to help her. No reflection on the medical community, but it did nothing to help her as far as her deterioration was concerned.
Yeah, you mentioned before that you said the doctor wouldn't help with that. Do you mean they refused? Like you were kind of trying to lay out well, hey, this person is suffering from dementia and this is how we're trying to help her, etc. I understand you have your responsibilities, but I need support. And was it they just said no? I don't quite understand there.
They didn't. I don't think they quite believed me. And my mother would go in and she would, I don't know how much experience you have with dementia patients, but they learn to speak in generalities. So, hi Christian, it's nice to see you. What a beautiful day it is today. How are the kids? How are your neighbors? What's going on with your dog? Things like that. Very, very generalized conversation, and it sounds so competent. and it was not. So I would go to the doctor with her. She'd be in the doctor's office, and the doctor would say, "Your mother is a lovely woman. She forgets things every once in a while. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it." And I would say, "But the driving, she drives left. We're in the United States. She drives left. It's not okay." And they said, "Well, bring her to motor vehicles and have her tested." My mother wouldn't give up her keys. My mother wasn't going to give up driving. That meant giving up her independence. So when I talk about the indignity and so on, it was prevalent everywhere, and she became a danger to herself and others, certainly with things like that.
It always kind of angers me when you hear physicians, doctors that gaslight their patients or try to tell you like how it is. It reminds me of a guest I had about a year or two ago. Shout out to Gemma. She was talking about women's health in the UK and how you'd often go and get a checkup for something, and then they would tell you, no, actually it's this. And it's a tricky one because obviously with a doctor, it's like they've got this training and like, yes, we're not the experts, but it's like, well, I'm with this person every single day. Like, I'm taking care of this person every single day. Like, I would know. I'm not, like, there's always the small shred of doubt, of course, in every situation, but it's like, as you said, generality is like what I'm kind of getting from this picture is that your mother's decline was, as you said, like faster towards the end, but like over time, there was still like things like the singing is interesting because it's like, is that muscle memory? Is that just good long-term memory? You know what I mean? Like, and the fact that your short-term versus long-term memory is there's kind of the battle. I mean, even in just everyday life, we have that, don't we? You know, like, my long-term recall is great, but I couldn't tell you what I had for lunch yesterday. You know, what does that mean?
That's pretty normal, actually.
Right, I know, but I just say, look, it's interesting that, you know what I mean?
Well, and we are talking about the aughts now here. So it's 2026, and this was happening in the aughts. And care has changed. People's understanding has changed. I probably had reasonably good resources, but again, because I was navigating this on my own, may have not had all the things that I needed. Music, interestingly, that you bring that up, music is the last to go. So people with dementia can often sing or play instruments the way they've done for their whole lifetime without difficulty. The last time I sang with my mother, she sang with her music completely upside down and very correctly.
What that means?
I don't know. I don't know. But I would say that that's a bookend. Like, my very earliest memory is around my mother with music, her singing to me, and one of my latest memories is her singing with me.
You mentioned earlier that, you know, a big way that you were able to kind of get through all of this was, you know, staying focused and just kind of working on things, working through things, you know, focusing on the care, focusing on what had to be done. But how did you, and I can't really think of a better way to ask this, but like, how did you keep it together? How did you stay strong?
My husband and my bestie, I guess. There were some tears there were a lot of tears along the way, but they were about the very obvious things, not the real heart-wrenching stuff that I didn't deal with until later. But I had the two of them. So they stood on either shoulder and helped me through it. And yeah, without them.
What do you think your mother would have thought of just everything, like how things went, like how you were able to take care of her? Like, what do you think she would have thought about that?
She would have been furious.
Okay.
Absolutely furious. And she would be furious about the book because what she would say, airs dirty laundry. She would be absolutely incensed by the whole idea.
Proud of you, know? I think I'd be proud. I don't know.
Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. maybe with her mind back, right? Yeah, were she whole? Maybe some understanding, just like I came late to my understanding of my mother and her love for me. It was a very specific brand.
Okay.
She was an odd duck, and but in the end, she was a terrific parent, certainly when I was a very young child. We fought a lot through my teen years and my 20s. We were very, very, very different people. Safe topics, the garden, and music. Sometimes art and literature. After that, politics, forget it. I hadn't grown up. I wasn't, I didn't think right. I taught you to think better than that. There came a point where I just didn't talk to her about any of those things anymore and stuck to music and the arts. Gardening and the arts.
It's the trickier thing as well, because like once you get to adult age, now it's like these people never stop being your parents, but you will inevitably clash, disagree. I'm speaking from experience here, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, I think it's kind of inevitable because you are different people. You're not going to see things the same way, and it's different. You don't live like when you're at home. When you're living at home, you're under their house, you're under their rules, and there are certain expectations and everything. And then once you leave, you're an adult now. Sure, you're naive. Sure, you're growing up. You don't know, but like your parent was in that situation at one point. Now you are, and as you move throughout your life, you become an adult by your own right. Like you make your own decisions. You come to your own understandings. You frame your reference for the world and everything. And then it's like trying to figure out, well, what does our relationship look like now? Because it's like we're equal, but of course we're not at the same time because we'll always have this dynamic. So it's like trying to find the happy medium, and I don't know. I think it's always a challenge.
She didn't know me in the end. She knew I was familiar. She definitely knew I was familiar, and she was always happy to see me. She didn't know my name or my children's names or my husband's name. Again, just knew that she was happy to see me. There wasn't any real way. So we went from not having a great relationship to not being able to have a relationship because she wasn't able to cogitate on relationship. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I hope my readers take away some peace about the decisions they make and the relationships that they have with their parents, and how they helped manage these difficult times, because it is truly difficult. Even slight dementia situations are hard to deal with. So, but she wasn't, for at least the last 10 years of her life, she was not capable of having a relationship. The relationship was going to be very one-sided, and it wasn't even really a power dynamic. Obviously a parent-child relationship is a power dynamic, but it wasn't even really a power dynamic. It was just a care dynamic. It was a protection dynamic. I have to protect this being that's important to me, but they are not who they were.
Is that, I think I already kind of have the answer, but was that ultimately why you decided to take care of her yourself versus, say, arranging for care elsewhere? Because I do hear a lot of time people say, oh, well, I want them close to me, I want them with me, I don't trust other caregivers, etc. Yeah, like, how did you come to that decision? What was the...
I did not. I cared for her for a time, and in bits and pieces, and expected and talked to her husband about how to care for her. But ultimately, the book is about the incarceration time. It's about the time that I said, we can't do this anymore. We are unable to. and made the decision to put her in memory care. And then she ended up in if you think a psych ward is, I shouldn't say that, if you think a psych unit is a difficult place to be, and it is, an Alzheimer's psych unit is devastatingly awful, and that's where she ended up because she was angry and agitated and wouldn't let anyone help her. I wouldn't have been able to care for her at home under those circumstances, either in her home or my home.
You've said a lot throughout the conversation that you felt you had regrets, and I think you've got a healthy relationship with it, because you do say afterwards, well, you know, it's kind of like the benefit of hindsight, really, isn't it? It's like, well, I did my best in that time. I did what I could do with the resources I had, and I did my best. But you've mentioned a few times you have regrets. So, like, what would you have done differently?
I think I would have told her what to do a little bit more. There's an example in the book about after she had her second breast surgery. I was very worried about her. Her husband was working. She wasn't getting any help at home. She was sleeping a lot. She wasn't waking to take her medication. She was already very fuzzy at that point. The dementia had already taken some hold. And I said to my husband, I want to bring her home for a while and care for her here at our house where I can do that and care for my young children at the same time. And he said, well, then go get her. And I said, I can't do that. I'm going to tell her and she's going to say no. And he said, so I said, she's going to get mad at me. I didn't want her to be mad at me. He said, better she should be mad here and safe than home and not. Go get her. So he was the one who helped me understand that there were things that I just needed to tell her to do. And I kept giving her choices. So I called her the following morning after he and I spoke about that. And I said, Mom, I'm coming to get you because I think you could use a little R&R at my house while you're feeling better, and the kids and I will take care of you. And this little voice on the end of the phone, and she just said, okay. And that was that. And I said, okay, so pack up a few things and I'll be there. Pack up your meds and all that and I'll be there. She couldn't even do that. She was just sitting by the chair by the back door when I got there, and she said I was too tired. She was wearing the same things that she had been wearing when I left her the day she came home from the hospital. So do things earlier for your folks that you're caring for. Don't wait to get them more care. Find out what the resources are. Town social workers can be helpful. Your church or synagogue or mosque can be helpful. There are all kinds of places to go to for help, and people are much more aware now. And if they can't help you, they're likely to be able to give you some guidance about where you can go to get help. So it was I should have told her, I should have directed her. I should have, done the puppetry thing and told her what to do, because she would have done a little bit more, but we still would have ended up where we were.
Sounds to me like you did your very best.
I tried.
I thought I'd include this because I told my girlfriend that I was going to be doing this show, because I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, but basically she and her family took care of her great-grandfather for a few years, and he also experienced dementia and everything. And she said to tell you that you're incredible. It's often a thankless job, and you've made the world a difference. So I thought I'd share that.
Tell her thank you. Tell her thank you so very much for that. I got a fair amount of criticism from some of my mom's friends who thought things weren't that bad. So that was kind of tough, and I really appreciate that. Please give her a hug and a thank you for me.
Oh, I will. Moving it forward, just a final couple of questions for you, just to kind of see things through for today. What has caregiving taught you about life?
Important memory and stories are to all of us, and possessions, yeah, they are what they are. Memories and stories are really our legacies going forward, and they're important.
Okay, I should add, I've started including this particular question because I always ask my guests best advice, biggest life lessons. I decided to add this because I thought it's interesting, and you also end up getting good advice from it. So we'll start with, what's the worst advice you've ever received?
Wow, that's a tough one. Probably that I didn't have what it took. I didn't have the direction and the focus that it took to succeed in life and not to bother with college.
It's crazy when people say stuff like that, isn't it? Like whenever you think about that, like I've had a lot of people over the years tell me, you're doing this wrong, you're not doing this right. And I've always just kind of pushed it to the side, because I think unless someone's living your life, they don't know what's right for you or what your capabilities are, and they never will. And everyone is happy to criticize and judge, and then it's like this saying, you're crazy until you're a genius, until it all works out, and then suddenly,
right, it doesn't work until it does. Yeah.
Okay, what's the best advice you've ever received?
I had it kind of came via way of a compliment. I had the same professor that said raising children is an amateur business. Made a comment, Sarah can teach anyone anything. And it changed my whole attitude about relationships and being able to impart wisdom where you have it, and I haven't always had it. But it made me think differently about doing that, and you cannot do any of that without love, and so it gets all wrapped together, and he shored me up at a time when I didn't think I could get from where I was to where I wanted to go. So
what's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
That you have to let people be who they are and love them anyway.
Couldn't agree more. Final question for you. Do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Projects, yeah, I'm working on my father, who's a different beast altogether. Learned a lot about how very much alike I am with my mom in so many ways. And him also. I'm going to be doing a book tour, an 8-city book tour. My book launch is April 22nd. And I'm back into writing poetry, which really kind of was a first love. My first poem is in the book. I think it's in November, the November chapter, and it's about snow. And I wrote it in 4th grade.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, and if readers are interested, they can go to my website at sarahvosburgh.com.
There we go. To the listeners of the show, I hope that you'll go out of your way to check out Sarah's work. sarahvosburgh.com. Thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your story. Amazing stuff. I'm very grateful.
You're pretty amazing yourself. You made it very comfortable to be here. You've been a gracious host, and it's been an honor. Thank you for your time and for your listeners' time.
The honor is mine. Thank you so much. To all the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast, I hope you enjoyed this show and got something out of it as much as I did. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you all in the next one.